I want to thank everyone for coming today. This is kind of our initial start off again reboot for the Houston chapter of the American Scientific Affiliation, which we'll get a little more into what the organization is. We're super excited to begin this chapter and to start a new community in Houston where we can talk about faith and science, the intersection of those, maybe some perceived challenges that people have, and really just learn more about God through theology and more about God through the creation that he has so blessed us with. So, sorry, who am I? My name is Micah Forshee. I am the Houston chapter of ASA, the president of the Houston chapter. Currently, I am a PhD student here at Baylor College of Medicine in the medical center here in Houston. And I do work and research on gut health and the bacteria that live within our gut. So that's kind of where I'm growing in my field of expertise. And how I first got introduced to kind of the topics that are all involved in faith and science is actually in land stewardship when I was in college. That's kind of how I was introduced to this topic and the tension and the harmony that also comes in faith and science together. And so from that point, I've really come to love and engage and enjoy engaging with all different sorts of interactions between faith and science. And I really love learning more of who God is, specifically in the difficulties and the challenges that come through these things. So that's a little bit about myself. Before we get more into kind of what we're going to go on to today, have Vicki introduce herself real fast, though a lot of you might know her already, but we'll do that.
Hi, I'm Vicki Campbell, and so I have my PhD in chemistry, and I remember one day, I've never had a conflict between faith and science. You know, when I took science classes, it just made me appreciate God's creation even more and the work of his hands. But I remember the day that my oldest son, Henry, came home from high school and said, "Mom, my friends don't believe in God. They believe in science." And so at that point, I felt like, you know, maybe there was more I needed to do. So I've just finished my PhD in theology. And so one of the topics that the topic that I focused on was the problem of suffering, because that is one of the most difficult problems of evil that cause obstacles to faith. And a lot of that has to do with evolutionary theory, Darwinism, and the implications of suffering in nature.
Great. Thank you so much. And so actually we have someone from the National Organization of ASA with us. Dana is here, and she's going to explain a little bit more about what the National Organization of the American Scientific Affiliation is. And so, yeah. Dana, can you share, please? Thanks.
Thank you so much, Micah. We're very excited to see the Houston chapter get re-energized. This chapter began about 5 years ago. It started out strong, and the leadership has, for various reasons, stepped away. And so when Micah reached out and said, "Hey, I'm interested in this Houston chapter getting re-energized," said, "Absolutely, we'll give you the support for that." So I am on staff at the American Scientific Affiliation. I am the chapter and affiliate manager. So I provide support to our chapters. We have 36 of them throughout the United States and Canada. Several of them are student chapters at institutions, and others are done regionally. We also have several affiliate groups which are centered around a topic area. So we have geologists, biologists, and then I'm actually right now in Michigan. I live in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm in Michigan right now on a retreat with the Christian Women in Science. So that's another affiliate of ours. So we have various opportunities to participate in the American Scientific Affiliation. Our mission is really about that harmony between science and faith. And an individual can join. You do have to sign a statement of faith if you join officially, but we also have a follower opportunity for anyone who would just like to be involved and hear what events are coming up, such as this one today. So thank you very much. I will, in another couple of minutes in the chat function, I will put the website for the ASA if you wanted to get more information about our organization as well as the events that we hold. And we also, for participating today, we have a code that will allow you to join for free. So if you would like to do that, I will put a code on the chat that allows you to do that. So we hope to see you at future opportunities to get together as Christians in Science. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dana. Sorry, one second. So without further ado, we'll get into our seminar today. So again, Reverend Dr. Vicki Campbell will be giving our talk today. She is a deacon in the United Methodist Church and has received her PhD in both chemistry and theology. And leveraging her unique training as a scientist theologian, she enjoys wrestling with difficult questions involving science and Christianity. And today she will be talking about how can animal pain and death fit into God's good earth. I'm very excited to hear this talk again and learn more about it and to discuss with all of you guys afterwards. And I'm very much looking forward to what you have to say, Vicki.
Thank you. So today I wanted to talk about this question: can animal pain and death fit into God's good earth? Okay, so in the West, we often view predation as an unnecessary source of suffering in God's good creation. And according to the Barna Gen Z report from 2018, approximately 1 in 3 of Gen Z and Millennials have a hard time believing a good God would allow so much evil or suffering in the world. And so this view has been influenced by popularized notions of suffering in nature. For example, we see this with Richard Dawkins' book, The River Out of Eden. For example, he writes, if nature were kind, she would at least make the minor concession of anesthetizing caterpillars before they are eaten alive from within. But nature is neither kind nor unkind. She is neither against suffering nor for it. Nature is not interested in one way or the other in suffering unless it affects the survival of DNA. It is easy to imagine a gene that, say, tranquilizes gazelles when they are about to suffer a killing bite. Would such a gene be favored by natural selection? Not unless the act of tranquilizing a gazelle improved that gene's chances of being propagated into future generations. It is hard to see why this should be so, and we may therefore guess that gazelles suffer horrible pain and fear when they are pursued to the death. So this leads to 2 claims that we will examine today. The first is the claim that if nature were kind, she would at least make the minor concession of anesthetizing caterpillars before they are eaten alive from within. So this leads to the question, how is pain perceived? And is the perception of pain present across all species? The second claim that's in his statement is that creatures like gazelles suffer horrible pain and fear when they are pursued to the death. And this leads to the question, does nature provide pain suppression and or a tranquilizing effect before death? So when we look at the scientific literature at papers like Do Insects Feel Pain, we find that there's no example known to us of an insect showing protective behavior towards injured body parts, such as limping after leg injury or declining to feed or mate because of general abdominal injuries. On the contrary, our experience has been that insects will continue with normal activities even after severe injury or removal of body parts. Insects show no immobilization equivalent to the mammalian reaction to painful body damage. So this is what's being reported in the scientific literature. And I'll point out that this is published in 1984. So this has been known for almost 40 years, and yet atheists still use examples of insect pain to claim that God is responsible for unnecessary suffering. Okay, so one of the things that I think will help us better understand what's going on in the animal kingdom with regards to pain is to distinguish between nociception and pain. So when we look at nociception, that is a reflexive response of peripheral nervous system to noxious stimuli. So this is something that we see in bacteria as well as human beings. So for if under the microscope, if you poke at a bacteria, then they will respond to that and try to scoot away. But we also have nociception in human beings, and you have probably experienced this as well. It's that reflexive response to quickly protect your body from injury. So if your hand touches a hot stove and you didn't realize that you were touching it, or it touches inside the oven, and your hand jerks before you even have a chance to think about it, what's happened is you've had a signal from the nerve endings of your hand to the spinal cord and back to the hand. It didn't involve the brain at all. That signal went by from hand to spine to hand to jerk back at a rate of about 300 feet per second. So that is a reflexive response of the body to protect itself. This is in contrast to pain, which is actually two different components that are perceived simultaneously. The first component is the sensory aspect of pain. The second component is the distressing aspect. The sensory aspect is your brain, is the brain telling the creature the location and maybe perhaps the type of injury. The distressing aspect is the psychological response to that. So according to the U.S. National Academy of Sciences publication, Recognition and Alleviation of Pain in Laboratory Animals, invertebrates like those insects we just talked about, they experience the nociception. That's the reflexive response that does not have contained the psychological distress associated with a perception of known as pain. Now, while pain discrimination experiments may eventually demonstrate the psychologically distressing aspect of pain in other vertebrates, that means a creature with a spinal column, current empirical support of psychological distress is only strong in mammals and birds. Okay, so let me repeat that. They only have strong empirical evidence of psychological distress in mammals and birds. Okay, so that means that when we look at this concept of, well, pain is you have to have both components for it to be categorized as pain. The sensory aspect is found in all vertebrates. So anything with a spinal cord can detect that something is damaging its tissues. But only mammals and birds will have the psychological distress associated with what we know as pain. So let's look at, we're going to actually, to better understand this distinction of those two parts of your brain that you're perceiving simultaneously, we're going to look at a human brain for a second. So the somatosensory cortex. So if you put your hand on the top back of your head, you're in the approximate region of the somatosensory cortex and the posterior insula. And these together, they provide the sensory aspect of pain. That's where your brain detects it. In contrast, it's the forebrain. So if you put your hand on your upper forehead, so your little finger is approximately where your hairline is, that is the region where the anterior cingulate cortex is. And this is where the brain registers the distressing aspect of the psychological component of pain. So if we go back to the sensory aspect, that is telling you where in your body you are having pain. So you may have a cut on your knee, or you have a blister on your foot, or you have a burn on your hand. It's telling you the type of the injury, and it's telling you the location. But the distressing aspect is the part that makes you want to cry. This is so painful. So the difference between a paper cut is not terribly psychologically distressing. But if you have you just had a root canal and you don't have, your pain medicine is not working, that's going to cause a lot of distress. Okay, that's in the frontal lobe. So that's the distinction. We don't realize that when we experience distressing pain, it's actually registering in two parts of the brain. But this is important to realize. We have two different components that are perceived as one. Because when we look at vertebrate brain physiology, so we're looking at anything with the spinal cord, we find that all of them, that's fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals, all of them can tell from their brain perception that they have an injury to their tissue somewhere. But it's only mammals and birds that have the psychologically distressing aspect that stops, that incapacitates them if it's severe enough. So while it may be foreign to us to imagine physical pain without psychological pain, let's consider reptile burns. Pain is actually the body's warning system, but domesticated reptiles, ones that are in artificial habitats with these heat lamps, we find over and over again that they are getting thermal burns on their bodies. So the pain psychologically distressing aspect is the body's warning system to protect its tissues. And yet these reptiles often sit under heat lamps until their tissues burn. And this further suggests that they don't perceive pain. And because they don't perceive pain, they don't realize they need to protect their tissues. Okay, so the distressing aspect of pain we see in mammals and birds alone. Okay, this is significant because the same region has the highest density of opioid receptors in the brain. Okay, so, and that's important because those opioids block pain perception. Okay, so your body can naturally produce opioids, and when they do and they go to this region, it blocks pain perception. So when we watch TV, we need to realize that there are many physiological changes being undergone in the creature when they're under stress that armchair observers like ourselves, we don't experience, but they do. So they have fear, which is not a pleasant response, but it triggers the adrenal response, and that will produce stress-induced analgesia. Analgesia is the blockage of pain. So fear, though unpleasant, focuses the creature's attention on the danger and survival. A major part of what makes feelings of fear so unpleasant is the corresponding cascade of stress hormones from the adrenal system that prepare the creature's body for survival when in danger. Cortisol prepares the body to flee or fight by flooding it with glucose. As the cortisol constricts the arteries, epinephrine increases the heart rate, and together these two mechanisms cause the blood to pump harder and faster. Endogenous opioids, and these are the opioids that are natural to the body, are released when they're released, which suppress pain perception in the animal and allows the creature to focus on escaping from the danger. So this is how the fear causes stress-induced analgesia and helps the prey animal get away from the predator. Okay, so one of the things we have to realize is this cascade of hormones during an attack creates pain suppression during that predator attack. We don't realize it, but this animal's frontal lobe is being filled with opioids, and that is causing the pain perception to be blocked. That means that if they strain their ankle while running away, it's not going to stop them from running. They won't feel it until much, much later after they survived. Or if that predator actually does kill the animal, they will be under pain block the entire time. Okay, and so I know this is hard for us to grasp. So I wanted to give an example of a human prey experience during shark attack and show you that even for humans, this is the case. So while swimming off the coast with lifeguards for life-saving training, Ahmad Hassam saw a large shark fin darting through the water. And he tells us that I was face to face with a 15-foot great white. I touched the shark with my feet to try to push myself away, but that only sent it into a frenzy. It swung its body around, making a colossal splash. It was nearly on me now, and my instinct was to somehow get on top of it. I tried desperately to push myself up, but for some reason, my right leg wouldn't move. I looked down and saw why. Everything below my knee was in the shark's mouth. By now, I was dangling against the side of the shark's body, out of breath and in shock. Then it took me underwater, still shaking me with my leg in its mouth. I could feel my body moving farther from its mouth as its teeth slid down the bone toward my ankle. I gave one last enormous push and heard a great snapping sound. Suddenly, I was free. I didn't know it, but halfway down my shin, there was nothing left. Okay, in this account, we can see that the shark attack gives us the perspective of the prey animal when under attack by a predator. Ahmad's sighting of the shark fin initiates the fear event that begins the corresponding adrenal response and is stress-induced analgesia. Consequently, moments later when the shark attacks, he will not feel pain from the event. When Ahmad tries to get up on top of the shark, he's surprised he can't and doesn't know why his right leg won't move. He must look down to visually ascertain that his leg is clenched in the teeth of the shark. Notice that his somatosensory cortex is working, telling him the location of his leg, but his anterior cingulate cortex is suppressed by endogenous opioids, so he is not able to feel any pain associated with the injury. The analgesia effect is so strong that he breaks his own leg in one enormous push to free himself. His natural pain suppression is so great that Ahmad doesn't realize that halfway down his shin, there is nothing left of his leg. So we also have to realize that predators selectively target those creatures that would otherwise suffer. That is actually nature's form of euthanasia. So numerous studies have verified that predators will preferentially hunt the weak, the injured, the sickly. Otherwise, those that would otherwise most likely suffer. So it is, we have to think about predators that this is not gratuitous or evil. This is actually the creation's way of minimizing the suffering of creatures in nature. So the conclusions that I believe we can draw from this is that nature is kind and has limited the psychologically distressing aspect of pain to more highly developed species, just mammals and birds. Nature has provided something better than a tranquilizing effect by blocking pain perception, even while enabling the creature to fight or flee during the opioid-flooded adrenal response. And third, God's predators reduce unnecessary suffering in God's good creation. And so, and that is in contrast to what atheists like Richard Dawkins like to claim. So in case you like to look at references and stuff, these are just some of the references that you might find interesting or helpful. These are some of the sources I used for this talk. But other than that, I think that we are ready for questions.
I can start us off.
Okay.
Thanks so much for the talk. It was really wonderful. I love hearing it. And for me, the idea of pain is not an inherent bad thing is new and but makes so much sense when you get into it and you learn it. And something I've been trying to learn and read more about. And so I love this topic. I kind of think one thing that I thought about is I keep seeing a lot of this sometimes seems like there's like a balance almost. And it's when things get out of whack and further messed up where things really get wrong. So this is kind of tangential to that. But when you were talking about the opioid receptors, I kept thinking of like the opioid epidemic that's going on. And so I just kind of think I wanted to ask, what's your thought with the idea of balance with this? And like pain is essential for life in some ways, but when out of whack can cause all these terrible things. So how do you think the role of balance kind of plays into?
Oh, that's really good. And that's also, more on the broader part of my thesis. But so number one, the first thing that you were talking about is, you were kind of touching on, is that we have to think about pain differently. Pain, the perception of pain is the body's warning system that there is something harming the tissues and the creature should respond. So This is why you only see it in mammals and birds, because they have longevity. A creature that's only going to live one season, like a caterpillar, doesn't need to think about living a long time. There's also when a caterpillar or the insect that lays these eggs, they lay hundreds, and they invest no time in raising them. So even if many are eaten, half of them are eaten, there will be enough to spread the genetics, okay, conserve the DNA. However, for mammals and birds, they're longer lived. So, and more time is invested in the young in order to teach them they have the intelligence to learn. Part of pain is you only see it in creatures that have the ability to learn from that. So more highly evolved. So without pain, you can't have longer lived, more highly intelligent, more highly involved species. So pain was necessary to get you there. But now you're touching on, there's a part of this talk that we didn't talk about. And we find it in especially in the mammal research. The bird research is kind of behind the curve because it's harder for human beings to read the body language of birds. But if we look at what we've learned from mammals, both scientifically and psychologically, is that all of them have this infant caregiver social emotional relationship, which is why the earliest years of mother-child or caregiver-child are the most important, because it turns out that when we, and this goes to all human beings, when we share our face with someone else, when we spend time just listening, not judging, just with empathy, we are naturally releasing opioids in each other's forebrains. So when we're socializing, when we're playing, when we're talking, when we're just interacting in a positive way or an affirming way, we are naturally releasing opioids. Now think about how our society has changed. We don't spend time talking. We don't spend time at the dinner table sharing our face. We're on screens all the time. Those screens are releasing dopamine, but that's not the chemical response that you need. Like there's other chemicals that you release when you're actually in positive human relationships. So when you go and visit someone that's sick in the hospital and feeling awful, then you are actually helping to release those natural opioids in their frontal lobes. And that's one of the things that the scientific literature shows over and over again in the medical literature, is those people that have these social networks have a much higher pain tolerance. So what it means is they have cancer just like the socially isolated person in the next room, okay? They both are going to have pain that, gosh, you could describe as a 6 on a scale of 1 to 10. But the person who has social relationships is going to have a higher pain tolerance, because every time they're interacting with people, they're getting hits of those opioids. So it's suppressing. They can still feel in their somatosensory cortex, boy, that it's pretty intense today, but I'm doing all right. And that's because they're getting opioids that are stronger than morphine unwittingly from those people that they're interacting with, versus the person that's socially isolated with that same pain is asking for pain suppressants past the lethal dose. Because even when you give me all you can, it's not enough to suppress the pain. So that goes to, I think, the opioid crisis over and over again. They're seeing that people that have been either abused or neglected or don't have those social interactions, they turn to artificial means of providing those opioids that normally would have come from healthy human interactions.
Thanks.
Did you guys have any other questions about the talk or animals or stuff you've seen on TV? Like, that's what it's dangerous to watch Big Blue Planet and National Geographic, because it's easy to think, oh my gosh, yeah, we're in a lot of pain watching them because of our empathy, but they've got the opioid hit, so they're okay.
Thanks, Vicki, for the talk. Yeah, if I can play maybe devil's advocate or maybe not, because I guess I am actually wondering what your response would be to this. But a lot of times we talk about the problem of evil or pain and suffering. And suffering's kind of a more broad term. And objectively, you can look at an insect perhaps that is being eaten from the inside out and say it is suffering, right? Whether or not it's experiencing pain. How would you, just if someone asked you that, or I'm asking you, how would you respond to that?
Okay, so there's two parts of that, I would say. So first is we have a hard time considering the possibility that we can be destroyed from within and not feel pain. But every single one of you lost billions of cells over the last 24 hours from programmed cellular death, apoptosis. You had billions of cells die, and none of us have been writhing in pain. Why is that? Because our nervous system is not hardwired to detect that kind of destruction. There's no response for us to make. We can't control it. It doesn't affect our longevity, so we don't have that response. In the same way, a caterpillar or any other insect, they do not have the neurological structure to detect pain. So in no way, you cannot suffer without pain. Okay, you cannot suffer without the psychologically distressing aspect of pain. And so, so we think about this caterpillar as being eaten from within, but it cannot detect it. It has no knowledge, it has no perception of that. And so it continues to, this is going on, and it will still act completely normally. It'll still be munching on the leaves. It will still, I guess caterpillars don't mate. You have to wait until you get to the insect version, but they will still, they won't act any differently. Like they've crushed half the body, like the back half of this is where I don't know my insect anatomy very well, but like the back half of the bee or the wasp, and then they'll still be walking around and trying to mate. I mean, that's like when you see, the praying mantises, where the female's eating the male in the middle of this, and they don't stop, there's no writhing and pain. So we have to first realize that insects, like those invertebrates and the reptiles, amphibians, fish, they don't have the structures. We don't see any evidence that they perceive pain. But here's another thing. I think when you read the literature, it's kind of loosey-goosey of what's pain versus what's suffering. And so, I would say pain is not, it's not perceiving, it's not pain alone. Suffering is not pain alone, but sitting in our pain alone. Let me say that again. Suffering is not pain alone. Pain is not the bad thing. Suffering is when it goes on and on and on unmitigated because we've had to sit in it alone. Because when we or any other mammal or any other bird is comforted by those interactions, our pain is lessened. And when we're doing that, it reduces our suffering. So number one, a creature that can't feel pain can't feel suffering. But some creatures that feel pain, like if I burn my finger on a iron, but then, I'm not suffering because it's acute pain, and it's going to be persistent for a few days. There's acute, persistent, and chronic. So acute is like you prick your finger on a thorn and you immediately pull it back, or you burn your finger. That's acute. It's quick. It ends quickly. Okay. Persistent is pain like a sprained ankle where your body's doing that on purpose to hurt for a while and oversensitizes that region because it's trying to warn you, hey, bub, get off the ankle because we're still trying to repair it. You can't put your full weight on it. So while you can kind of treat it normal for a while, if you're stepping too hard on it, it'll remind you. That is persistent pain. Chronic pain is where we have the biggest problem, where it's ongoing, either from old age, your body's breaking down, maybe you have cancer. Now, remember, in the natural environment, there would have been predators that would have noticed that and taken us out. I'm very happy we don't live in that environment now. But as a consequence, we live with more chronic pain. However, it is very noticeable that people, again, that are in larger social networks have higher pain tolerance. That is, they perceive, in fact, the ones that are most likely to be in so much pain, they are asking for euthanasia, like we see in some of the European countries. Over and over again, you see that they are socially isolated people. And it makes you wonder, if they were put back into community, would their lives change enough that they wouldn't be asking to die? So, Mark, how did I respond to the devil?
Yeah, you did well. That's sort of what I was thinking, but you clarified a lot. So thank you, Vicki. Can I ask kind of a follow-up question as well? So the other thing that's rumbling in my mind as you presented was the relationship between fear and pain. And I think you kind of covered that with the opioid stuff and the story of the shark attack. You know, he was trying to get away. He was experiencing fear, but not pain. I guess before you presented that story, I was kind of thinking, well, when I get hurt, my reaction is fear. Like, I don't want that thing to happen to me again. But you know, when I walk up on like a gecko and it perceives me as a predator, it's fearful, right? Because it goes the opposite direction. So I don't know. I'm having trouble kind of nailing down a question, but I'm just kind of pondering the connection there between fear and pain and suffering as well. So what is the gecko running from? You know, if it's fearful of me, but not of pain, what, is there something there?
Okay. So, you bring up some good points, like that fear response, like, okay, realize that, there's some fear that's automated. Okay. So your amygdala, for example, and if you want, I can pull out the picture of the brain again, but it's kind of in the lower part of your brain, kind of where the brain stem is attaching to the brain. Okay. So, the amygdala is helpful in survival. Okay. So you are walking, this is, millennia in the past. You're walking through the dark to get back to your village. There's all this dark forest. There could be a predator out there that's ready to jump out at you. So you're kind of on edge. You've got some level of anxiety as you're walking back to the village to safety. So your amygdala is priming your system that if I hear anything, I'm setting off the fear response. I'm setting off that adrenal response. So you're ready to either run like heck or you're going to fight and you're going to survive. Okay. So the amygdala, that's a healthy response. However, when we have post-traumatic stress disorder, or we have had we have this constant fear and anxiety, that's usually from an overactivation of the amygdala. Okay. So now we've gone from something that it's intended for our benefit. So it came from a benevolent God. But if we were in the war and we were constantly in this unnatural system where there's bombs going off and stuff, we're going to have an unhealthy response that anxiety is constantly turned on. Now, just to finish that part with the human being, it turns out that if we can actually talk about our experiences, and so like if soldiers have someone who's safe and non-judgmental to just release these, we start moving it to a different part, the logic part of our brain, and it downregulates that amygdala so that we can get the anxiety and depression associated with an overactive amygdala and PTSD to go down if we could actually talk about stuff like that. That's how human beings deal with it. But again, so that's, we have normal, healthy fear. We call it a fear response, but in a way, don't forget that a lot of that yucky feeling in our body is the physiological changes coming from that quick hormone change where it's getting your body ready to fight or run. None of that feels good. It's like the way you feel before you have to do public speaking. I mean, Mark, you do it all the time now, but that's something where we're not really in danger, but we have that yucky feeling through our body because our body is reacting physiologically the same way. So we associate negative feelings with fear, and that's intentional because the point is, if you went on with your knitting or whatever, when there's a tiger coming, you wouldn't survive. Okay. So we have to, fear isn't necessarily negative. However, as a human being, if we allow ourselves to be anxious all the time, that is terrible for our long-term health. And God knows that, which is part of the reason we're constantly told in the literature, trust God. God knows what you need. Cast your cares on the Lord. Give yourself the Sabbath rest. And so often human beings that can do that are in such a better state of well-being and overall health. But the ones that are anxious and can't give those things over to God tend to be the ones that internalize that stress and then get the physical health ailments that go along with that. So does that, I know, fear versus what's healthy, what's not. Yeah.
Thanks. And even as you were talking in that story, I realized, the person, as his fear response was kicking in, he wasn't considering his pain level. He was, subconsciously willing to break his leg to get away. So, that survival response is not necessarily, or maybe not at all, tied to avoiding pain. So that's kind of something to chew on.
And that is a good point, because one of the other things that it turns out, and I didn't list in that, there's a even longer list of the physiological responses, but one of the things is it sharpens your mind. So you're able to focus very clear, it gives you very clear thinking on what exactly I need to do to get out of this situation. Like some people have even talked about, feels like time slows down and you just have this clarity of thought. Well, it turns out that also, if you have a little bit of nerves before you take an exam, you're going to do better on the exam because you're getting a small taster of that adrenal response, and it's going to give you more mental clarity before you take the exam. So they've done tests where, again, going into the exam, the person that is, when they're in that heightened state, they do better because they have more mental acuity. So like you noticed with the shark guy. All right. Any other questions? Yeah.
I have a comment. My background is actually in ecology, so I really appreciated the slide that showed the predator and prey and talked about that the predator is going after the individuals who are sickly and old, and that's nature's way. And it for me, there's layers to it. There's a scientific and if you look at the nature explanation on that actually the predator is going after those individuals that are easier to capture, right? But that when you look at it from the faith-based side of that the Lord is so wise in the way that he has ingrained some of this aspect of the way nature works, and that is just part of his whole design in creation. And so I was really uplifted by that particular aspect of your talk. So thank you.
Thank you. And there's the ecological part is really beautiful, and that was also my thesis. Actually, I just had a book proposal accepted with Cambridge Press, the Cambridge Element series. So I'll be writing a book on God and the problem of animal pain, where I go into more, what do we do with forest fires? What do we do with predation? What do we do with famine? Blah, 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 and parasites and things like that, where I kind of address the entire ecosystem as well as elements like how is pain perceived. But so, yeah, I'll be sure to try to get a copy to you when I finally get it done.
That I would definitely be interested in reading.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, Micah, you want to take over?
Yeah, before we go on, I just want to address one of the comments that John put in the chat. He said, addressed to me, he said, I bet there are some aspects of gut health and pain that are related to protecting our health. It seems like I might have a special insight in that area. Thanks for bringing that up. It is actually really interesting with the gut health and pain and connections with the immune system and mental neurobiology and all that's really interconnected. A lot of that stuff has to do early on in life. So the training, the development, a lot of development in your body, early days. And it's really interesting. The best thing I can think of that actually isn't a gut example. But in one of my classes, we studied a specific research investigation where they took animals and like as soon as they were born, they put them in a housing apparatus where there was no pain. It was completely padded. They never experienced any trauma, any pain, which we might think is a good thing. We might try to provide that for our kids or other people sometime. So no pain, no suffering. And these animals, after they had grown up, like couldn't sense pain. They would like step on a nail and wouldn't do anything at all. And the implications of that are astounding in my mind. I mean, this was not at all a philosophical course. The course I was in was strictly like a neurobiology, the molecular mechanisms of pain and perception. And I was just flabbergasted when I was hearing this study and learning about it. I went, this is so deep and so meaningful. And again, kind of this understanding that our current culture has on like pain and suffering and the avoidance at all costs can be really problematic and counterintuitive in the long run. So yeah, that's just what popped into my mind when I saw that comment. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Vicky, if you wanted to, or anyone else has any comments on that.
My favorite probiotics, kombucha, kimchi, yogurt.
Yeah. So,
Mike Micah makes a great point I've thought about before too. Is as human beings, have we gone too far to avoid any pain and suffering? I think your point, and everybody rushes to immediately remove all that, and depending on we're not talking about somebody on a deathbed or whatever, but just in regular life, is it good to just remove it all, even the psychological or the physical? And we have this mentality: no one can suffer, no one can experience pain, and we got to rescue them immediately. And to Vicky's point about trusting God, sometimes you have to sit back, and maybe you're messing things up if you're stepping in there too much. I mean, that it's very complicated, to your point, Micah. But I think it's a point you're making here that not many people really think about. In that, it's better to think about this stuff first. How you're going to handle it, and every individual's different when you face it. So, I think you brought up a really good point. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, and just to give some insight into another topic theologically that the ASA has just begun to have some seminars on and think about is transhumanism, which is essentially to eliminate death, and whether that's a good thing. As an ecologist myself, that's a really bad idea. What do you do with all of these individuals then who want to continue their lives and you have limited resources? And so there's a lot of theology that goes around that particular question. And so I think it plays into even the suffering aspect of what Vicki was talking about. So thank you for that comment, Mike.
And Mike, this is just kind of not really related, but just a thought again that came to me as a gut scientist. I've learned studying Hebrew. I have an MDiv and an undergrad in chemistry, so I love the connection here. But studying Hebrew, I've learned that they used to think, or they used to locate the center of the self, of the soul, and the gut, and they didn't speak about I love you with my heart, I love you with my gut, or whatever. That's not a biblical phrase, but you get what I'm saying. So I would just be interested in another topic, another presentation, if you would maybe kind of speak to that someday. Something to ponder. So
yeah, I'd love to do that. There's a lot of, so maybe I'll just give a teaser of what might come one day. So there's a whole field that's just kind of flowering right now and blooming, is that our gut is actually the largest producer of hormones in our whole body. And there's multiple types and sets. So that paired with there's also a vast number of neurons in our gut as well that connect to the brain. So those two things combined have huge ramifications for overall body health and psychology and brain health as well. So it's really exciting. It's very challenging, but I love studying it and looking into it. It's really cool. But yeah, and with that being said, there's many cultures throughout civilization and time that have found the seat of the person. They all have different phrases, but like the seat of the person is not in the head, not in the brain, but within the torso, within the gut and the intestines. And to me, that was always, how did they come to that rationale? But multiple societies over time and ages have come to that. And sometimes we don't give the ancients as much credit as they're due.
Yeah. So Micah, offline, we'll have a conversation. I want to know what books that you've read on that. I want to learn more about hormones in the gut.
Yeah. Someone should write a good book. Most of it's just articles, but yeah, we can talk about that.
God in the Gut. That's the book you need to write, Micah.
Hey, if someone's willing to help, I would love to write that. I have no idea how to do that, but that would be amazing.
You and Mark get together.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Okay, well, great. Thank you so much, everybody. I just have a couple more things I wanted to share. So the Q&A time went great and amazing. So we'll pass over our second discussion we're going to have. So I just wanted to bring up a couple of announcements before we wrap up our time together. So our next event is going to be January 29th. And I'm personally very excited for this event. So this is going to be in partner with the National Organization of ASA, American Scientific Affiliation. And it's going to be a 3-hour event on a Saturday, January 29th. The first 2 hours are going to be with the author, Philip Yancey. He's a prolific Christian author. He's written books that people might have heard of: Fearfully and Wonderfully Made, Where's God When It Hurts, The Gift of Pain, a lot of book topics that are very akin to what we're talking today. I've actually read The Gift of Pain for the past year or two sometime, and I just kept thinking about it over and over again today. I would highly recommend that. He wrote that book in consortium with a medical doctor in India who basically figured out why lepers lose their fingers, and it has to do with pain. It's great. So that is going to be January 29th. We're going to be doing this at the City of Refuge Church, which is really close to the medical center in Houston. It's the church that I go to. And so the first 2 hours will be virtual. We'll be listening to Philip Yancey and an online panel. And then the third hour, we will be having our own time of discussion and meeting locally at our church. And the topic is going to be God, Science, and the Pandemic, with lessons from John Donne. So I'm very excited about this. It'll be an in-person event. We'll all get to meet each other and see each other. And I think this is going to be a fantastic opportunity to invite others to this meeting and to get to know each other, and a great introduction to what the ASA is.
If I may, Micah, just to expand on that. So the first hour will be his talk, and then they actually will have a panelist of other highly known and well-known individuals in the sciences that will then provide some context in a panel discussion. And then the third hour, depending on how you would want to do it in your chapter, then you can do some fellowship or maybe another speaker.
Yeah. Very excited. Thank you so much for that.
Well, and one other thing, like I'll point out that like Mark Porterfield's church is way far out of Houston, but since I think it would be fine for him to share this coupon code for a year's subscription, I guess, to ASA, to his parishioners, but also maybe if Mark was interested, he would be able to show this the symposium at his church to his people, or anyone else that might be interested in attending and watching Philip Yancey.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good idea. That's not something that occurred to me, but if it comes up, and that would be a great opportunity for us. Yeah, we're about from the medical center about 2.5 hours or so.
Yeah. So rather
pretty
than
close to Austin. So
yeah, that might be a good opportunity to share some of this content with people that can't get to Houston, perhaps. So just something to think about.
Yeah, that is definitely something we can have a conversation about. And the more the merrier when it comes to this. Thank you for that. So just kind of finishing up, kind of why the ASA. I think we've had a really good introduction to this. It's really some way I see it is a great place to learn and grow in both faith and science, particularly in a community of like-minded Christians as we come together and wrestle with these difficult questions. So it's great. I've really enjoyed being a part of it. Obviously, I'm pretty young. I haven't been in a long time, but I'm looking forward to growing more and more and building this community. If you would like to get more involved, first of all, you're welcome to become a member or follower, and I'll mention that again on the next slide. We also are welcoming for more leadership in our local chapter. So it's Houston, but greater Houston area. We can expand that as much as we would like. There's open positions to be treasurer, secretary, a webmaster, a member at large. Just really, if you want to help out and help us expand this and grow this and provide energy, we would love to have you. And this is my email here. I should put this in the chat. So I will put my email in the chat. So this is, there we go. So if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. What are the other geographical chapters within Texas? I am not exactly sure. Dana might know that. I think, is there one in Dallas, Dana? Or is it just Houston right now?
No, I don't believe we have a Dallas chapter. There was a Baylor chapter.
Oh, yeah.
And you can actually visit the asa3.org, and from the chapters tab will show a map.
Yeah. Again, and so if you are interested in becoming a member at all, or sorry. Yeah. Here's kind of the link. I was going to put this in. Sorry, I was going to put this link in as well to the chat, if I can find that.
I usually...
Oh, you did.
Yeah, I'm usually in the driver's seat when I have two screens and I'm able to quickly do this.
Yeah.
I can't do it right now because I'm only on the
Right.
But yes, you can get to it from, again, the homepage, asa3.org, and then go to the membership tab, and you can get to all of the information to join.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that code there is that the correct one? I've been putting into the chat the correct one. It is ASA3.
The code you put in earlier was ASA 2021 gift. I think that.
Yes, and it is cap sensitive.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. So, okay. Thank you all so much for coming today. It's just a little bit after 11, so I want to respect everyone's time. If I may, I'd like to pray for us before we head out, and then we'll say goodbye after that. Okay. So, Lord, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for your blessings in creation and nature and the wonderful way that you reveal yourself through all that is here on this earth and in this universe and in the word that you've given to us. Thank you for this community and be with us as we start this endeavor of bringing a discussion of faith and science and the difficulties that can come to Houston. Grant us your blessing and help us to be humble in all that we do. We love you, Lord, and thank you so much. Amen.